welcome. This is Redline News Network. My name is Jet Likings, and welcome to Taking It to Redline. We have a special guest for you tonight. This person was the technical advisor to the Fast and the Furious 1 and 2, the once owner of the orange Mark IV Supra and blue Nissan Maxima in Fast and the Furious 1, the once owner of Brian's, aka Paul Walker's, R34 GTR in Too Fast, Too Furious, the writer of 2017 Crashing Cars, auto enthusiast, tuner enthusiast. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have Craig Lieberman for you. Craig, thank you for joining. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I'm just waiting for the applause to die down.
Yeah, right? Same here.
Great intro.
Thanks. So, Craig, this is our segment where we deep dive into the people in the automotive and supercar community and try to ask questions that are somewhat out of the norm. Now, I know you've probably been asked every question to the moon and back regarding Fast and the Furious. We're going to try to see what we can come up with tonight. But I just wanted to start out that it's a small world that we have you on tonight, because after we were speaking yesterday, I remembered that the working title for Fast and the Furious was actually Redline. And I seriously didn't even think about that until, we had this scheduled. So it's a small world.
Well, it was a pretty common name. I'm not sure why they didn't go with it. Maybe it was because there was already a bunch of other properties that are already using the Redline name. But the Fast and the Furious movie title comes from a 1954 film that is not really related in any way, shape, or form, but they bought the license to use that. And I thought it was a weird title back at the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's such a small world. So, Craig, without further ado, let's just jump into it. So, the first question we have for you tonight, the Fast and the Furious was the catalyst to car culture for so many people, including myself. Back then there was no YouTube. There was not a lot of footage of street racing. The only way to really glimpse into the culture was to either be in it, possibly pick up that movie of Mischief, if you remember that from back in the day. But outside of Southern California, Miami, or even New York City, it was tough. But Fast and the Furious accomplished this. Did you ever think this would happen?
Did I ever think the movie would happen, or do you
ever think that the Fast and the Furious would be the catalyst to car culture for so many people?
Well, I think it woke a lot of people up, but there were a lot of people doing it for a long time before that. I mean, street racing was not something new that just started in 2000. I mean, there were movies like American Graffiti, what was it, Two-Lane Blacktop, or Two-Lane, something like that. I forget what it was. It was Two-Lane Blacktop. And many other movies that had illegal street racing in one form or another. But this was the very first time they had done something with tuner cars as a focus. Mm-hmm. And so that, the David versus Goliath thing, that's the whole attraction of the tuner cars, the Honda Civic that beats the Ford Mustang. So the producers and directors immersed themselves in this culture after reading an article based on a New Jersey street racer, right? Mm-hmm. And that's how the whole thing got started. But I had no idea, even after working on the film and seeing it multiple times before it was even released, frankly, I thought it was going to go straight to DVD because it just looked cheesy, man. They didn't have the music in it yet and all that kind of stuff. So it's like looking at your own home movies, when you're 5 years old, realizing we're all dorks at 5 years old. That's what it felt like being on set. And then when I saw it all edited together at the very first time in front of a real audience on premiere night, after the hijacking scene with the Honda Civics, the whole audience was out of their chairs screaming and pumping their fists and cheering and everything. And I looked around and said, oh my God, this thing's going to be a cult classic. And that's what basically Rob said, the same thing,
So do you think it was at that point when you were at that first viewing and everybody was jumping out of their chair? Do you think it was at that point you realized that this was going to be the catalyst for, people to get into this culture, or was it possibly later on?
I still didn't think that because, it wasn't a movie made for gearheads. There was never the intended purpose. As a matter of fact, I'm getting ready to release another video talking about the actual purpose, which was to create a crime drama. So that was not the intent of the movie. This was a crime drama built around cool cars and the street racing culture. So there were some technical things that changed from the recommendations that we had made that, weren't 100% accurate and that kind of stuff. And I thought serious car people would never take that movie seriously. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until many years later when I started to see the popularity overseas, because for that period from 2001 till 2008 or 9, nobody was talking about the movie in America except on forums, and they were bashing it because this piece of dialogue was wrong. The cars weren't really what they represented, yada, yada, yada. So no, I had no idea until, about the time Paul passed that this thing was a global phenomenon.
Wow. Okay. So kind of, speaking about the car culture, and I mean, you've seen the progression of the car culture. You've seen the progression of the culture happen from body kits and neons of the late 90s and early 2000s to possibly stance and airbags of today. What do you miss the most of the tuner culture of the late 90s?
I think I missed the full fabrication stuff. I mean, back in the days, I've said this many times. If you went back to a car show in 2001, you go up to a Honda Civic, right? A car that somebody is making payments on. Every single part on the car would be changed: the bumpers, the fenders, the lower skirts, the intake, exhaust, motor work, turbos. The interior had been pulled out and either painted or covered in suede or diamond tuck or whatever else they were doing to it. Roll cages, audio video system, steering wheel, all the gauges change, everything. Nowadays, it's tires, wheels, and a muffler,
Hmm.
and that's it.
Yeah, and it's funny you talk about like the marbleized, I think paint. I think it was on Hector's car, replacing, the interior panels with suede and different materials. And I mean, you just don't see that anymore.
Well, these people were spending, $15,000 on a $15,000 car or more.
Hmm.
And a lot of these kids still lived at home,
Yeah.
so they were milking it, which was good, or they were going to school or whatever. And then as they got older, their taste changed. They got into BMWs, Audis, VWs, or whatever, something a little higher up in the food chain, as it were.
Hmm.
So it was only the OGs that stuck with the old Japanese classics. But I miss that passion, which we don't really have here in America in the same way anymore, except in these small little isolated pockets around the country. But you go over into Europe, I've been traveling around for book signings, and they are absolutely rabid car fans. It is amazing. And with restrictions over there in like countries like Germany, it's almost impossible to modify a car, but they're still doing it.
Wow.
So,
So on the opposite side of the spectrum, what is your favorite evolution of today? Favorite evolution of the mod that we're seeing out there today?
well, I think the people who are modifying cars, like in the R35 GTR community, for example, the old days, people were putting on crazy body kits, big wings, and all that kind of stuff. And there's still a little bit of that with the R35, but most people are doing performance stuff, E85 conversion to pick up the horsepower, turn the boost up, titanium exhaust system, sticky tires, lightweight wheels, bigger brakes, and that kind of stuff. And that's the same thing with the Porsche group. You see it with the Lamborghini guys, the guys who, have these higher end cars, the BMW guys, the Mercedes guys, the Audi guys, all these guys have moved up the food chain in cars. There's still a little bit of the airbag stuff and the stance going off for a different crowd of the people, which is great because they're starting with better cars. But that's the evolution. The quality is better, but the number of modifications seems to be lower.
So you kind of bring up a couple different microcultures per se, the Honda guys, the BMW guys, et cetera. It's very easy to enter into these subcultures, right? You take your GTR to a meet, you're gonna, talk with other like-minded folk. But it seemed like you have steered clear of these microcultures, and you've owned some, fanboy cars from, your M3 to your Mark IV Supras to your current car, the GTR R35. But you seem to stay clear of this and go your own route. Why so?
I'm not sure if that's 100% accurate. I mean, if you go around and search like BMW forums or the Mark IV Supra forums, that kind of stuff, I've always used my own name as a signature when I go into these forums. So just my first and last name. So I've been in the Supra groups, the BMW groups, the Audi groups, the Lamborghini groups, the Porsche groups, the 6 Speed Online, Luxury 4Play. I've been active on a lot of those things, but what happens is that I find that there's a very core group of people that are truly like-minded to me. And so I tend to gravitate towards those people and then take those conversations offline. And now with the advent of Facebook chat, I've got my little car group, my little posse, my little group that I'm a part of their group. And it works better for me. I've got my GTR guys, I've got my Fast and Furious replica builder guys who have all let me into their groups, and they welcome me. And it's just been a good microcosm. It keeps me busy enough. It's not that I didn't want to be involved or never or aren't involved. It's just that I get involved and I funnel myself down to the core group of people that really are like-minded.
That's awesome. So, I mean, you spoke about your cars of today, but if we could back up in your previous cars owned, and you've owned an interesting mix. I mean, from Isuzus to Lambos, and looking at your timeline on your website, it looks like you grew up with Asian makes, and then you kind of went domestic. You had some Firebirds, some V8 Datsuns, a Mustang, an SS Impala, and then it seemed like you went import and then never really went back. Why so?
Great question. When I had my 93 Mustang GT, I was on my third motor, a 347 board and stroke that I had somebody build a short block, and I did the rest of the work myself in my garage. And I was out on a little street event and pulled up next to a guy in a Supra. And I don't usually do the stoplight Grand Prix, but I did that day. I got out on him on first gear, shifted to second, and he went by me like I was standing still. I said, okay, maybe it's time for a turbocharged car. And then I bought the Supra, and the rest is history. And so I
So
have.
sorry. So was that the influence for your yellow or orange Mark IV Supra? I mean, the
Yep.
influence for you to build it. Yeah, I mean, because I think you bought it pretty much stock, and obviously you put a
Bone
ton of
stock.
work in it. So I mean, was
Bone.
that the influence? When you
Yep.
did get beaten by that Supra in your Mustang?
I knew what Supras were. I mean, just like any other 17-year-old kid of that time, we were reading the pages of Road and Track in the back and looking to 0-60 times of every car that's in production. No, so I knew the performance stats, the horsepower, the price, the MSRP of all these cars. And Supra was always on my radar. I wanted one in 1985 and a half when the 85 and a half Mark III came out. I wanted a Mitsubishi Starion, TSIR, the wide body, Dodge Conquest, Mitsubishi Starion. I had Datsun Z, so the Japanese cars were always on my radar. But when I got my hands on the Mark IV Supra, literally within 3 days, it was at the shop getting modified. So
Wow. So just to clarify, though, that Mustang did take you to Gapplebee's.
yes,
Yeah.
no, the Supra took me to Gapplebee's. I was
Yeah.
in the Mustang. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Sorry, the Supra took you to Gapplebee's.
Yeah, I'm trying to use the kids lingo, and I'm not sure if it makes me smarter or makes me look more foolish, which I don't know how that would be possible, but.
I think it works. I see it. I think it works. Keep at it. So if we fast forward now, you have the R35, then you have the Audi S3, and I've seen everybody ask you questions, whether it's your live Instagram posts or even on some of your videos. But you've stated somewhere along the lines of you're never going to get rid of the current GTR. What makes this car so special compared to your previous 41 cars?
Well, bang for the buck is number one. I mean, you have to spend a ton of money to get a car that does 0-60 in 2.7 seconds. It's been very reliable. It's a good car. It's got the reputation. I don't know how I would replace it with something equivalent. There's arguments to be made for a lot of great cars, Lamborghini Huracans, GT3 RSs, McLarens, but none of them offer what this car offers. I can drive this thing to the supermarket, fill it up with groceries. I can carry 4 people in it if I really had to, if 2 of them were double amputees for sure. But it's got navigation. I can put it in cruise control, put the comfort settings on, and just drive it. And I've driven it to Vegas and France and Diego. It's just a great car. I can't think of a more balanced car. Are there better cars? Yes, but for a lot more money.
So on the other side of things with your Audi S3, I mean, you state that you have the S3. I mean, it's a very tuner-friendly car, but I mean, you don't really speak about it. We don't hear of any mods for it. There's
It's
no
the wife's
publicity.
car that she drives it. She's a
Okay.
Porsche girl. She's had Porsche 911s, right? She had a 993 back in the day, and she wants another Porsche, but she was commuting a long distance to work, so she's been driving this thing. She's getting the bug to modify it. It's just been a great car for us. I mean, I'd like to lower it, of course, put suspension on it, stickier tires and wheels, bigger brakes, and turn the boost up. But she doesn't want to mess with it yet. The thing hardly gets driven, because we both are working for home and have been for a while. So that car is over 3 years old. And I think it's got 17,000 miles on it.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's just a good car.
I'm surprised you haven't snuck a tune in there, turned up the boost and
She's a car girl. She knows she knows my BS. So she will know as soon as she drives the car. What did you do to it? What did you do to it?
That's awesome. So switching gears here, downshifting, going to the subject of bringing street racing back to the Fast and the Furious. Now, I saw you started that petition about 6 months ago. Personally, I did sign it myself. I think it was back in May. It seems like yesterday you had just north of 8,800 petitions signed out of your goal of 10,000. But just why did you start this, especially after making an episode on YouTube on how it's not going to happen? I mean, the movie series makes money with the action, with these A-list actors. Why start a petition and see if we can bring street racing back to the Fast and the Furious?
It was mostly a gesture and an experiment combined, really. I wanted to prove the point that if this thing was so important to so many people, that that thing would have literally millions of signatures on it in a relatively short amount of time. But the simple fact of the matter is, the tuner culture is a microcosm of the world's population. It really is. I mean, if you took and counted every single person who was actively have recently modified a tuner car or are modifying tuner cars right now, it would be such a tiny subsect of the population that it would have to be largely ignored. And Universal, like any good business, is making a product that services as many people as possible. And you have to think there's a good portion of the global population that doesn't even drive. They don't own cars. They don't even drive, but they do go see movies. Whether you're in India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, or wherever you live, you go see movies. A lot of people go see movies. So if they make an action movie with some cool cars in it and they're making a lot of money, then they're doing their shareholders a good service. If they're trying to make, these little cult films that make, $200 million on a $40 million budget, when they could be making, spend 150 million to make 1.5 billion dollars, I think the shareholders would be more excited about the latter than the former. And so it's just a business, and everybody has to recognize that.
So you don't think they could do maybe a small spin-off like they did with kind of the Hobbs and Shaw series? You don't think they could do a spin-off and just, tackle the street racing world?
Well, perhaps if they did, if they spent, you remember the first movie was a $39 million budget. You couldn't make that movie for $39 million today. You couldn't do it. A simple walk and talk picture, with just two people walking and talking, like You've Got Mail. They don't go anywhere. It's all in New York on set. It's a $40 million budget, whatever it was, right? That's it. But car pictures, you can't do a picture for 39 million. But I will say this: if they are smart, and I like to think they are, they're making Fast and Furious 10 and 11 as a two-parter, right? So 10, the two-parter will be 11 if everything stands the way it's being publicized now. Now, at some point at the end, they could probably wrap it up by doing a circle back to illegal street racing. And my concept is let's get the children of Brian and Dominic Toretto. They meet in high school. They're buddies. They get into legal street racing. They get mixed up with the wrong people. And Dom and Brian have to come out of retirement to save their kids and that kind of stuff. And of course, Cody would play Brian or whatever it is. But who knows? Maybe they can do that. If nothing else, as an homage to the original concept that got them off the ground, a way to bring all the old school people who have literally tuned out from the franchise back to the theaters to see it. Because if they get a chance to see the green Eclipse again, and some of the cars from the first movie, what happened to Dom's RX-7, and what happened to, Leon, Johnny Strong, that's it. It would be great. It would be a great way to end the franchise for the pause, because darn well that at some point they're going to spin it off in another way. That the kids will come on board, or it'll be kind of that ilk kind of franchise, like Star Trek, New Generations or whatever it is. When they were done with the old Star Trek, they moved on to Generation. I think. I'm not a Trekkie, so if I misspoke, I apologize.
I am not either, but I'm pretty sure that's how it goes. I want to park the notion of the final Fast and the Furious going back to street racing for a minute. And you brought up Fast and the Furious, so let's dive into a couple questions, not the typical ones like the floor pan falling off, in a street race. Why did it happen? We're going to stay away from that. But digging into the Fast and the Furious, obviously you were there for Too Fast, Too Furious. With it being filmed in Southern Florida versus Southern California, did you get a glimpse into the tuner world there? And if so, was it different, than Southern California? I mean, you got two different geographies. Was it two different worlds in the tuner scene?
It is. It's so weird. I mean, the great thing about the tuner world, the car modifying world, is the diversification. Southern California, it was influenced heavily by the Asian communities, Filipino and Asian community. Latino community is very important. The Caucasians, the white people in Southern California have a wide range of everything from VWs to muscle cars and all that kind of thing. So there's a lot of diversity, which is great. You go into South Florida, there's a bigger Latino influence. So the styles of modifications are different. To give you an example, my family is Italian, right? You go to an Italian grandmother's house, you know what it's going to look like. It's got plastic seat covers, right? Velour couches and all that kind of stuff. So it's stereotypical, but that's kind of what it is. But they have their own taste, it seems like, old world pictures and all that kind of stuff. And the same thing, if you go into a place that's heavily Latino, there's a different influence. There's, the chrome is more present. You see a lot more chrome. You see a lot more chances being taken with crazy paint jobs and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So it was really cool to see that kind of stuff. I'm not the target audience for that because I was considerably older than the people in that little subsect. Yeah.
Mhm.
So when I'm looking at this cars, I'm like, okay, these aren't JDM classic cars. Okay. So I have to just get that out of my head that we're going to be building JDM classics, and we're going to have to let John Singleton and his production team, have the creative control to do what they wanted to do. And that's what they did. And so there are people who say these cars, the people who are hardcore JDM classic guys didn't really like the cars, but people who are from other communities or sub communities within the tuner world love the cars. So, they're right because they're making money. I'm just sitting there being grouchy and old and saying, no, that's not the way you do a Skyline. You don't put Shelby stripes on a Skyline. A lot of people all over the world are copying that car, and I'm scratching my head, go, really? Okay, well, all right.
That's funny. Speaking of actors, I know you brought up the director, but speaking of actors, is there a Fast and the Furious actor that is involved in the culture the same, if not more, than how Paul Walker was? As you know, he had that huge collection of cars from M3s to Supras. Is there another actor from the first or second movie that was into it like that as much as Paul?
Well, Ludacris has got a car collection now. I don't know how far that goes back, but he struck me as a car guy. I had very little interaction with him on set, so we didn't have any deep dive discussions. Sung Kang, who I've spent some time with just recently, we were talking about another project, so I went up and visited him. Sung Kang is all over the internet with a variety of different projects. He's a Datsun Z guy, which makes him cool in my book automatically. He could do no wrong in my book. But he's just a cool, chill guy. I went up and met up with him and Evan a couple of months ago. We had a good conversation. So he's building cars. He's doing the car stuff. He's traveling in Southern California, and this is the best place to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think he has the collection that Paul does. At least I haven't seen anything, but he seems like a private and humble guy. Mm-hmm. So it's not like he's hanging his keys out in front of me and say, hey, I've got 12 cars. You want to drive? No, he's not doing anything like that. He's just a humble guy.
Yeah, I think he is, because I'm not aware of his collection. So what would you say is the worst Fast and the Furious question you are typically asked? The one question that it's, oh my gosh, here's Craig Lieberman, technical advisor to Fast and Furious. What's that dumb question that you are always asked?
It's hard to say what's a dumb question because a lot of my audience is young, right? A lot of people are literally 12 years old or just getting into the movie. And so you got to grant these people safe quarter, right? Because they don't know much about, I didn't know jack squat about cars when I was 12 years old. I just knew what a Ferrari and a Porsche was. Mm-hmm. But if there's a dumb question, God, I guess the most important one that people should know if they've done any kind of research into the Fast and Furious franchise is about Skylines. The Nissan Skyline GTR being illegal in this country because of the 25-year rule. People still ask, well, what if I do this to get around it? Well, if somebody there's people a lot smarter than you, me, and other people trying to do this, but the people a lot smarter have been trying to get around the law for decades, and it's never happened. So the answer is no, but they still want to argue. Mm-hmm. Well, why not? But why not? But why not? I feel like I'm somebody's parent saying, no, you can't have pudding for breakfast. It's just, I'm sorry. It's just, there's just no way around it legally, but why not? Oh my God. Here's the link. Here's the video. Here's the guy who was doing it, way back when it first started on camera with me telling you it cannot be done. Mm-hmm. Oh, but yeah, I know a guy who knows a guy whose cousin's brother's sister's mother does it. He's lying. Sorry.
Yeah. Wait for that 25-year rule,
Yeah, wait for it.
So would you say that's the most common Fast and the Furious question you're asked then?
Not even close, but it is one that comes up, and then no matter what answer I give, it's 40 different texts. But take a look at any of them posts on Instagram. Anytime I show a Skyline, is it legal? How's it got there? Who brought it in? How's it getting around the 25-year rule? There was a bond, 3,000 comments on one Instagram post about Skyline legalization, and nobody wants to follow the link. Nobody wants to watch the video. So they're flying blind.
Come on, do your homework rather than waste your time.
It's a different generation. I'm pretty sure my generation was just a spoon fed. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe it's just bias. You know how you get when you get older. You get grumpy.
So is there a question that you haven't been asked? Maybe a question you kind of, wake up in the middle of the night and think, wow, how come nobody has ever asked me this question? Is there anything like that?
One question that I rarely get asked, I would say never, but rarely, is like, why has Rob Cohen never come back to the franchise?
Hmm.
So Rob Cohen, who was a pleasure to work with in the first movie, he went off with a Vin Diesel to go make the Triple X movies, right?
Mhm.
So I feel like I think I read it in an interview, but I'm going to have to look it up. So my memory is that he talked about Vin Diesel in some capacities being like the next Arnold Schwarzenegger, right?
Mhm.
So he wanted to go off and do this Triple X thing with Vin. And then for whatever reason, they decided to reboot with Too Fast, Too Furious. May have had something to do with the studio leadership, Scott Stuber, because typically when the VP comes in of the studio, those people don't last long because they're shifted focus. It's high pressure job, and you're only as good as your last big hit or your last big season. So my understanding is that there's a lot of turnover there. So it may have to do something with the management change at Universal, that other people come in that are in greater favor, or cronyism to an extent, is my understanding. Nepotism, cronyism, probably both are in play. But he went off and made a good movie with Triple X, and then Vin Diesel did Chronicles of Riddick and all that kind of stuff. And by that time, Too Fast, Too Furious was in the can, and they were talking about Tokyo Drift. Paul didn't want to come back because he thought, well, first off, the studio didn't want Paul to come back because they thought Paul was too old.
Wow.
And this was in 2005. They thought Paul was too old in 2005. Don't forget, he was making movies all the way to 2013.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's just the politics that goes on studios, which, I only have a tiny little glimpse of it. So I'm sure there are people far more educated who could speak about it. I've talked to David Martyr, his wife, Cool Martyr, Kool Martyr. She was a studio executive, and she gave me some insights into that. And I was very thankful for them for sharing that to me. But it's stuff that I wouldn't understand, how it all works and all that kind of thing. But I think that, Rob's dedication, he actually went to an illegal street race to observe. He went to a bunch of car events, hot import nights, walked the show floor at the middle of the night with a bunch of 20-year-old kids. And, he was on board. He wanted to capture the spirit and the flavor. So, a lot of the credit's got to go to Rob.
That's awesome. I've never heard that before. So that's interesting. So the question I told you to park, or the answer I told you to park. So if given the opportunity to cast the cars for the final Fast and the Furious, with the notion that it's going back to its roots with street racing, but you had to cast these cars today, what would you select?
Okay, so it depends on if we have the same characters, all right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, Dom would be in a Hellcat Charger or a Hellcat Challenger, right? Built, right? Skinny front tires, sticky back tires. Brian would be in a built R34 with a big Lopi cam and a big single turbo, light and flywheel, 10,000 RPM revving, all that kind of stuff. That's what Brian would be in. Got to be in an R34 Skyline. Vince would be in a 300ZX twin turbo. Let's see what else. Letty, if she was still around, what could we put her in? A proper built S15 with the big single turbo. We can do that. Jesse is dead, or maybe he isn't, because there's conflicting information even from Rob Cohen. He's changed his mind in the past year. Jesse, I shouldn't have killed Jesse, he writes in one post. And then in another post later on, he writes, Jesse's not dead. So you never die in a Fast and Furious movie because, they always come back, whatever.
Yeah.
Leon's kind of out of it. He just posted on his Instagram last week, yeah, I'm not in it. I'm not in Fast 9. So, and Vince could be in any number of cars. So that's like what I think where they should be at this point. Or, maybe they're all rich from, all these heists they've been doing for the last 20 years, and they're all driving what we've been seeing: Bugattis, McLarens, Koenigsegg's, right? Lykan Hypersports, God knows what else. But, those cars that people don't identify with really, because they'll probably never own one, but they do aspire to. So who's right and who's wrong? Judging by the box office, I would say Universal's doing it right, and they should continue down the path because they're making money hand over fist.
I love your choices. You didn't go the twin turbo R8s or the Huracans. You didn't do the new NSX, the new Mark V Supra. I love the choices because I mean that's exactly how you take it back to the roots.
Yeah,
Give
maybe
them.
one of them could be in a Mark IV Supra. Maybe Jesse could come back in a Mark IV Supra.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's got to go back old school to the JDM classics if you really want to bring it back full circle. Now, if you're not, then I guess keep doing what you're doing, the Audis and the Lamborghinis and all that kind of stuff, which people are just gonna. Some people are going to be, very excited about that. Other people are going to be going, okay, again with this.
Exactly.
Can't please everybody.
So I want to ask you some questions. This will be more of like a shotgun approach, but I want to ask Craig questions. Maybe things and stuff that people don't know about you. So just kind of a shotgun approach on this, quick fire. What is one of your hobbies that we don't know about?
I build model ships, World War II. I'm a big World War II aficionado. I read my first World War II book back when I was 8 years old. So I watch documentaries that are almost exclusively World War II, and that's one of my hobbies.
If you could find the plutonium to get the 1.21 gigawatts to go back in time to speak with your younger self, what would you tell your younger self?
I would go back to 1980 and tell myself to stop spending good money on crummy cars.
If you could find more plutonium and go forward after that and ask or tell Paul Walker one more thing, what would it be?
Don't get in the Porsche.
Um,
Don't
and
get in
what
that car. Yeah.
and what does the 42 in your Instagram handle mean?
It's been my lucky number for a long time. That's a number that keeps coming up in my life. Right? I've owned 43 cars if you count the Audi, but 42 is a number just keep coming back in my life.
Interesting. Appreciate that little shotgun session. So, what's next for Craig? You have a book, you have a successful TV series, you have a cult-like following. What's next for you?
Wait a minute. When did I get the successful TV series?
I mean, YouTube series.
Oh, yeah, okay,
YouTube
yeah.
series.
The YouTube, honestly, the YouTube series is just for fun. People want the information. There's a lot of people who haven't had time to read the book. There's a lot more information in the videos beyond the book because the book really only covers the first two movies, and I've gone beyond that now, and I will continue to do that. But it's really there for information. I don't take sponsorships on my Instagram at all. I've never done a sponsorship on Instagram. So the information I post there is just to get people excited about the content that's in my videos, or just give them little tidbits as I remember them or want to rehash them again, or answering questions that people have DM'd me. I'm getting about, now it's slowed down a little bit, but 400-500 DMs a week.
Wow.
From people all over the world asking questions, South America, Europe, Eastern Europe, Russia, all over the world, really, except maybe China.
Mm-hmm.
But, I'm trying to put the information out there while I'm still alive, because as we know, people are starting to drop off like flies. One of the important persons of Fast and Furious was a fellow by the name of John Weiser. John Weiser was a picture car guy. He was like the Rain Man of cars. Okay. If you needed a windshield for a R32 Skyline, he would know where there was one in a cave in Tibet. Okay. He worked on most of the movies, right? He's credited in there. Nobody knows who the guy is except all the picture car people, right? He's a savant, that guy. He passed away a little over a year ago. And he was responsible for a lot of the greatness you see with the picture cars. So I'm putting this stuff down, on video, on paper, on social media, so that information is out there, because people are dropping like flies, young people.
It's sad. So could you give us maybe a sneak peek of what's coming up in the YouTube world, not the TV world, but the YouTube world? What are you working on?
I'm going through the cars. I'm working on Tokyo Drift cars. The next video that's coming out is, why were there technical errors? And there's a story behind each of the technical errors and a dialogue, that kind of thing. Touch a little bit upon continuity errors, but not so much. And then after that, I got to go through Tokyo Drift and do, the profiles of the cars. The problem with most of the cars after Tokyo Drift, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, is most of those cars are transient. They're in and out. Mm-hmm. They come in, they're built as stunt cars from the outset, right? So the modifications that are on them are not for beauty or style other than the paint job. They're there because cars need to do certain stunts. So the suspensions change all. So it's not the same as what the first movie was, because all those cars were already built and Universal just rented them from private owners. So that's what makes those cars very special. In Too Fast, Too Furious, we reused most of the cars in the first movie, reconditioned them, repainted them, changed the wheels and body kits, and then that's what we use for there. After Tokyo Drift, it changed. They were building stunt cars now, so it's not the same. But I'm going to go through it anyway. It's hard to get information on some of these cars. I wasn't on set for those movies, so I'm relying upon cars that have been sold and people I know who bought the cars, or people I know had insights with the production, and then notes that have been passed to me from crew members and that kind of stuff. So that's next.
That's awesome, because I know maybe 6-9 months ago I saw what you put out. I'm like, shoot, he's going to run out of content, and I love watching your videos. I obviously subscribe to your Instagram, and I'm telling myself he's going to run out of stuff to talk about soon. It sucks, but it sounds like you still have a pretty good plan in front of you of just more content to release.
I've got at least 4 more videos or 3 more videos for Tokyo Drift, and then we can get into the other stuff. But while I'm working on those, I'm gathering data and putting together notes for the other cars. So I'll go through in the order, 4, 5, 6, and so forth. So I've just got a long, long ways to go.
That's awesome. Looking forward to it. Well, Craig, we're going to start to wrap up here. We appreciate your time. Thank you for jumping on and giving us a deeper dive on, the Fast and the Furious, Craig, and other things like that. To the Redline community, if you haven't already, please follow and subscribe Craig on YouTube and Instagram. Likewise with Redline, follow and subscribe us on YouTube and Instagram. Craig, again, we appreciate you jumping on. Is there any last thing you'd like to say to the viewers?
If you're going to do illegal stuff with your car, like intersection takeovers, don't film it. Don't post that nonsense on social media. We want to be bad sometimes, but if you're filming it, they're coming to get you. So don't do that, please.
Yes. We do not condone that either. So, Craig, no, again, thanks for jumping on. Appreciate it. And to the Redline viewers, until next time, let's keep it at Redline.